And welcome back, everyone, to AdAge's Emerging Tech Summit. I hope we all had a good break and are ready for our next workshop, which I think touches on a very practical use of AI, which is becoming more and more relevant in digital advertising. We are going to see how well generative AI handles display ads and social media ads, as platforms from Meta to Google to Amazon are releasing more generative AI tools to handle multiple parts of AI creation. And we have two representatives from within the Brandtech Group digital agency holding company to teach us how generative AI can take a prompt and turn it into an internet ad campaign. So please send questions throughout this talk, and we can address those following the presentation. And now here are James Dow of the Brandtech Group, which also operates AI-powered ad platform Pencil, and Jellyfish's Adam Vincent. Hi, James and Adam. Thanks for joining.
Hey, Garrett. Thanks for having us.
Thank you for having us, definitely.
Thank you, Adam. Now, I'm going to hand it off to you, James, because you have a presentation for us, and we're eagerly awaiting, so thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm James, and I'm going to kind of do the second half of this presentation, but I'm going to leave you in the very capable hands of Adam, who's going to land us in the world of prompting.
Good morning, everybody. Good afternoon, depending where you're at. Let's get started with learning a little bit about generative AI. One of the fun things about generative AI, one of the things that I think is most interesting, is that we actually don't know what all generative AI can actually do for us. In fact, it could actually be easier to define what generative AI can't do. It can do so many things that we like to quote our Brandtech CEO, David Jones. Generative AI is a horizontal. It changes every aspect of everything that we do. Because it can do so many things, it can integrate into many different aspects of our businesses as it kind of transforms what is business as usual. Regardless of what you're doing today, there's probably a way that you can integrate a generative AI tool to make your job a little bit easier. One of the things that makes generative AI unique is the way it can look at the world. Gen AI models are trained on massive amounts of information and basically anything more than it would need for any single given task. The great thing about this is that it learns different patterns across all these different ways of looking at the world, which allows it to then create new things about the world as well. I'm actually a big data geek. I have a favorite data set, the iris data set collected by Sir Ronald Fisher back in 1936. He collected 4 simple measurements, height and width of a couple of different plant parts, of 150 different iris flowers. He used that data to create a statistical model to identify these different iris species that he took the measurements from. This was a huge mathematical leap forward at the time. Why I bring this up is that it's a big demonstration of the difference between more classic machine learning and what generative AI can do for us. These traditional iris models were able to predict these specific iris species, but only by looking at the world through the lens of those 4 measurements. Generative AI instead can take those measurements and give us text descriptions. And in fact, even the newer models can give us fancy new images of these iris plants as well. In fact, that's literally what I did with this slide. I had Google's Gemini model do exactly that. Given some information from that iris data set from 1936, find me an iris that matches this description. Generative AI unlocks the ability to understand and work with data in entirely new ways. What we're really trying to accomplish with working with generative AI is to build ourselves a tool. Just like a hammer to drive in a nail or a paintbrush to add paint to a canvas, all of these tools are there to help us create something in some new and interesting way. We use these tools because they help save us a lot of time and a whole lot of effort. And of course, generative AI tools are not going to be any exception to that. However, instead of being a little bit more focused, like a hammer or a paintbrush, generative AI models, and especially large language models, the LLMs, are a lot more like a multi tool. They're one package of tools that you can activate for a bunch of different kind of functions. If you open the screwdriver on the multi tool, you can drive in a screw. If you open the pliers, you can pull out something that's stuck. With each of these different tools, you get to choose which way to actually use it. On a physical multi-tool, you're doing this by turning and opening physical parts of the tool. But with a large language model, you're actually going to do this with turns of phrase. The way we get the model to activate one of its tools is simply called a prompt. And this prompt is a pretty fitting name for what it is because it is a call to action. We're prompting the model to do some task for us. The prompts that we send in are simply a task description. The prompts are telling the model to perform some task, such as generating maybe ad copy, converting data from one form to another, maybe from one platform to another, or maybe just helping us to come up with some new ideas. The instructions for this task are written in your natural language. You tell the model what the task is that you're trying to accomplish, or maybe what question you want answered, and the model itself figures out how to do this. It's kind of like magic.
Hmm.
Interestingly, this is actually programming. But the powerful part is that we don't need to communicate with a large language model in some special code language like Python or Java or SQL. This natural language model allows us to communicate just like we do with everybody else. The biggest revolutionary part of Gen AI is that everybody gets to be a programmer. Technically, you've been a programmer your whole life, but you probably didn't realize it. Every time that you've asked someone how to do something, you've been using instructions. This is basically you telling a computer to do something, but instead of executing on some silicon chips, you're executing it on a meat computer of your friend's brains. Importantly, though, since we're giving directions, we need to make sure that our directions are easily understood. Prompt engineering is the skill of learning to use your natural language to instruct the model about what you want it to do. It's us, as the users of these new fancy tools, learning to actually control the tool effectively. You can kind of think of large language models as your own personal assistant. If you had a human assistant to do a task, how would you go about describing what you would like them to accomplish? You would explain in just plain language what the task is, maybe why it's important, and if it's especially complex, probably even break it down step by step. Do task one, then task two, then task three. You might even provide some extra examples of previously good outputs. I have done this before, and this is the kind of thing I would like you to actually produce for me. With doing all of these kind of explanations, it's important to be able to kind of write these things down as well so that people who are doing these tasks over time can reference back to those as well. Working with generative AI assistants is exactly like working with a human assistant. What you need to do is simply break down the problem just like you would for a human, especially step by step, and write that down. This is actually really all prompt engineering really is. It's us again figuring out how to communicate with our new generative AI systems a little bit more effectively. If you do just communicate with Gen AI like a human, honestly, you're going to get most of the way to what you actually need. However, most of the way isn't actually all the way. Generative AI, unfortunately, isn't human, despite some claims to the contrary. It's not sentient. It doesn't actually, have a soul. No, it doesn't know things like that. But it does have a lot of interesting things and does have especially some quirks. So what I'd like to do is tell you a couple of prompt engineering techniques to help you improve your communication with your new assistant. Personas are one of the most useful techniques in prompt engineering, which is why we're going to cover that first. If you start your task descriptions by assigning a persona, it directs the model to evaluate this task through the lens of a specific expertise. Remember that models are trained on a lot of information. So telling it that you want it to act as some specific expertise makes it a little bit more reliable of a tool for you. This is also an extremely useful technique if you're building chatbots or working with chatbots, because that allows you to converse with whatever that persona happens to be. You can ask it your questions. And of course, you can also even have it tell you questions that you may not know. Tell me what it is I don't know that I should know. These are basically your experts on call. There are many, many, many useful personas that you can have that model adopt. On this slide, I've listed a few of the more useful ones, but the limit is pretty much only your imagination. The models have been exposed to kind of all the information around every single field of study, so you have all of that kind of directly at your disposal. You can even mix and match these different personas to get the best results or even maybe generate some fresh perspectives. You might ask it to be both an editor and maybe a storyteller, or maybe a copywriter and a poet. This gives it that idea of looking at the data in new and interesting ways and coming up with new and interesting things to tell you about that as well. You can use these personas to help cover an area you're weak in. For example, I'm not much of a translator myself, but the model happens to be pretty good at that. Or you can also use it to help you in areas that you are already pretty good at. I happen to be pretty good at data analysis, but it makes me faster at doing data analysis by using some of these generative AI tools. One thing I do want to specially mention, the very last thing I have on my slide there, which is prompt engineer. Since you're all kind of learning how to be better at communicating with these tools, why not let the model help you learn that? It can actually help you to craft those prompts originally, something James is going to show off for you a little bit later on as you're actually building up your tools as well. Our second big prompt engineering technique is formatting. Proper formatting really enhances the readability and the comprehension of your prompts. The prompts are in natural language, but remember again that they're also tools. You need to be able to maintain these tools over time as your tasks evolve. What you need to do is break down complex problems into smaller, more manageable steps, or maybe even some small subsections. You can use things like bullet points and headings and subheadings, anything that you would otherwise do, just like communicating with any of your kind of human assistants, whether that is, again, your own actual human assistant, a freelancer, anybody else who's doing this task for you. In addition, we can also provide formatted output examples. And it helps if the AI understands the structure of what you want it to actually create. If we use a really default kind of prompt that doesn't have a lot of structure, like generate a blog post about AI and marketing that is informative and engaging, who knows what we're actually going to get out of that? We didn't really give the model much direction. So what it's going to do is pretty much up to it. It's going to do a little bit of random stuff. Again, imagine handing that same prompt description to any random intern, to any random freelancer. What do you expect to get back? Random stuff, right? Instead, if we produce something like we have on the slide here, a little bit more of a formatted example. In this case, we're giving it a specific title. We're giving it an introduction, a body with a couple of bullet points, as well as having it generate us a conclusion. What that's going to do is make it more likely to produce this kind of output that we actually want. More importantly, if you remember, I said that prompts act a lot like code. Which one of these do you think would be easier to debug? If you're having issues with what it's generating, which one of these would be easier to fix? Which one of these would be easier to correct and be able to produce that better kind of formatted output as well? The final technique I want to share with you is having a consistent tone and style. These are essential elements that really shape the overall impact and the effectiveness of your content. If you tell the model relevant information about the type of content you expect it to produce, you can help it to be a little bit more reliable as a tool for you. Tell it what audience is going to receive the output. Tell it, is it going to be a formal or casual audience? Is this for serious or humorous purposes? Should this be confrontational or diplomatic? Very similar to our output formatting that we just saw, it really tells the model about the way that it should actually create, not necessarily just what it should create. And really, the important thing here is that it reduces the rework that you have to do to make this actually be the final output that you really want. On slide example here, if we simply say, give me a blurb about our company's dedication to our customers, we might get something like, our company is dedicated to providing exceptional customer service, kind of this formal version of that, or maybe a little bit more informal, hey, we're all about making our customers happy. Hit us up anytime. Neither one of those is objectively right or wrong, but one of them might be wrong for your specific brand. To wrap up my section of this, the thing I really want you to remember about prompting and prompt engineering overall is that you should communicate with these Gen AI models nearly the same way you do with humans. The more useful information you can tell them, the more likely they are to be able to produce something that you actually want. Persona, formatting, and tone are some really good boosters to the effectiveness of your prompts. But the great thing about large language models is that they actually understand natural language pretty well. So even though these techniques are good, they aren't always going to be required for every single prompt. What I actually recommend is start by keeping the prompt a little bit more simple, a little bit more straightforward. And then if it doesn't work exactly like you need, add a little bit of complexity to be able to then get the desired output.
Mhm.
And now let me hand it over to James to show you all the fun stuff that you can do with all these prompts that I've been telling you about.
Thank you very much, Adam. Yeah, so this is a whistle-stop tour. We haven't. I would love to spend hours with you to show you the myriad platforms, but we will try to get in prompting, text to image, some upscaling, image to video, some translations, and some music. All right, let's go. But wait, hold up 1 second. So the first thing, as Adam was saying so well, you're a human coming into this, right? And you need to use human language, but you also need to remember how to be a human in terms of your creativity. This is not a one button magic tool, okay? It's pretty special, but it's not going to just give you magic answers without you putting some effort in. So just some ideas about how to behave with creativity in Gen AI. Stay curious, keep interested in different ways to talk about it. Find new platforms to play around with. On that one, follow lots of other people. Get on X if you don't think it's too toxic. Find other places. Go on Reddit. Make sure that you're following people, because the amazing thing about Gen AI is the community is extremely open. There's no gatekeeping. Prompts are being shared left, right, and center. New tools are being shared, and you're learning a lot from the people that you follow. That's where I'm getting all my information. So definitely follow people. Try every tool. So this is something that I definitely live by. Get your hands in the clay. Have a go with a tool. If you hear something's come out, most of them have free credits or kind of free versions. So jump in, chuck a few prompts in, see if it works for you. Even if it's something you want to pass on to the people that you work with, you might say, this is something I found, could be really interesting, and get involved, because each new tool that comes out is another step in fidelity or speed for you to get involved in. You are creative. Most people from school onwards are taught that they're not creative unless they can draw really nicely. But we're all humans and we're all problem solvers. So you can take that into the work that you do. You can find interesting ways. You can remember that you can have fun with these tools. It makes amazing stuff without much effort. So you can reignite if you've lost your youthful creativity, I think Gen AI is a really nice place to try and earn some of it back. And channel your inner child. Be fun, be silly. You can't break it. You're not going to do anything that can't be undone. So go and smash some stuff about in generative AI if you're not doing that already. All right. Okay. Final caveat. We have something called Pencil at the Brandtech group. We could spend an hour talking to you about it, but that's not fun for anyone. We can make ads end to end with Pencil using chat, creating imagery, doing performance advertising. It has $1 billion worth of ad spend in it that helps us predict what's going to work and what's not. Let's not talk about that right now. Let's talk about everything else that you can kind of play around with. Right, number one, I'm going to rattle through these. How do I build a consistent brand voice? This is a really interesting one. You've got lots of people across the world using your brand, or you've got volunteers. How do you ensure that people are able to talk in the brand voice? You can do that with ChatGPT. This example we've done for a friend of ours who's at One Young World, who's running a not-for-profit around accessibility. So if we jump into ChatGPT, we click our button that says Explore GPTs, right? So you get this page that people have made amazing tools. If there's anything that you can think of, someone's probably made it already. So that, just like there's ways to talk to the LLM, there are even, think of these as little programs that help GPT become more useful for you. But we can make our own, which is really cool. So we get this page, we can put a name in, a description. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to chuck this prompt in. We want it to act as a brand guardian. This is our persona for Rights on Flights, our organization. Our goal is to help users develop ideas, develop copy and other tasks that fit the brand world. That aims to guide conversation to a place where the ideal feels on brand, yada, yada, yada. We're building something that's going to help us make something amazing, and it's going to be consistent. So we chuck all that in. And what the best thing about this, as was said earlier, this is natural language. I'm not programming this tool. I'm saying, I want you to do this. And the best thing about it is it gets it. So it says, well, what should my role be? What constraints should I have? Are there any guidelines for how I should talk to people? And you can just answer all that stuff as it comes to you. You can also add documents. So I've added a tone of voice where I've scraped all of the social media messages that this organization has put out and uploaded it into here. So now we can kind of start asking it questions. So we can say, write a social media post on accessibility. And now it's doing this. This is its first response. You can see how basic my prompt was. But because it knows who to act like, it knows our tone of voice, it knows the things we care about, this is the first thing that comes back. And if this is my organization, I can think, yeah, it's a pretty good start. We can make some changes and move on. But it's the speed at which you can get to this now. And it's the fact that everyone in the world can be given this GPT for them to be using the same brand voice. Here's some ideas for a campaign targeting regulators that it just came up with straight away. So you can kind of program it to do anything that you want it to do. So this is a nice idea for how to get campaign ideas going really quickly. Right, so how do I create great prompts for image generation? Now, there are some tricks to this. Again, we're going to use friends of ours from One Young World. This is the Marine Diaries. And we thought, okay, let's jump into Midjourney for this one. Now, what you get straight out of Midjourney, if I put an orca in the sea surrounded by plastic waste, is actually pretty good. Like, the model's amazing. It makes great stuff. And you could probably go live with that if you wanted to. But we're not quite happy with that. It does some really nice stuff. You know, these are close-ups of what comes straight out from that prompt. But we're not going to stop there. We're going to use this little trick, which again is about arranging your prompt and giving it formatting. So I want to create a prompt for an image of an orca in the ocean surrounded by sea plastic. I want to make that thing. I want 3 options for it. And then the important bit is the formula. I want a subject description, some background descriptions, any elements in there, the effect and the overall composition. And I want it styled in 1 paragraph because I'm lazy. I want to copy and paste it as quickly as possible. And what it comes back with is some really detailed stuff, right? It's thinking about how that it can bring this to life with atmosphere and with interest and with lots of detail in there. And what I get back is a real range, right? These are much more interesting than the initial images. And I can start to feel out if I want something like the one on the left or the one on the right. I think the one on the right is really evocative, interesting image. Okay, what do we do next? We can take that and we can use AI to edit it. So we can change the scale by using magic background infills. We can just paint over things and ask it to remove things or add things into it. And that helps us do, we can have widescreen images that fills the background in, or we can do tall images, 9:16 for social media posts. And it's fundamentally not changing the image, it's just adding realistic background elements to it. The next thing I do, which is integral if you're going to put stuff live, is to upscale. So I'm using Magnific here. There are some other tools. This is my favorite at the moment. But as we zoom in, we can see the difference that it makes to run this. It effectively hallucinates over the image, adding more and more levels of detail. And you get something where you can probably get, I think it's like an 8 or 12K image if you really push it, which you could go live with outdoor. And that's our kind of final image that's been upscaled and very beautiful. Here's some work that we run in our residency. So Salma, who's a fantastic Gen AI creator, produced these beautiful pieces of work for us. I thought I'd just show them in terms of advertising, the type of stuff. She was given a brief and a week to put this together and came back and gave us a masterclass on how she did all this. And she made some really beautiful beauty imagery. She invented the brand. She talked to ChatGPT about it and kind of invented all this stuff within about 5 days. I think it's absolutely beautiful. Okay, so we've got a great visual asset, can we turn that into video assets for social media? So again, here's the trick. Someone's already done it, right? So we're going to be smart. We're going to find a GPT and we're going to find a way to talk to Runway. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to drop my image of the orca in, and I'm just going to say, I want a video prompt for an orca swimming through ocean plastic waste. So again, I'm not having to be very smart here. I'm a bit like being the creative director and getting professionals involved to do the stuff I can't do, but I'm sort of leading what I want from this. So what it gives back to me is a really nice, very detailed prompt that it's ready to go into a text to video generator. So it's giving lots of details about the angle of the shot, that it's cinematic, that we're using diffused lighting, all the type of language you need if you're going to put a shot together. I'm going to jump into Runway, which is going to be available in pencil very soon. And we throw in our image that we've upscaled, and we throw in our prompt, and then we just hit generate. Now, these tools are always updating with new functionality. They just released camera controls very recently, so that allows us to kind of move stuff around. Very cool. And what we get eventually is our picture come to life. It's a really beautiful image of our orca swimming through sea plastic waste and without other little fishes. Looks lovely. Well done, AI. Okay, final section, I believe. How can I make product accurate content? So this is great, but I don't sell orcas. I need to sell specific stuff. How do I do that? So for this example, I've picked a car. This is a Ford Puma, and I am going to download a load of these images, and we're going to train a LoRa. So that means we're going to train a tiny model just on this thing. So we're going to teach it what this thing looks like, and then we're going to get it to make accurate images for us. So this is a tool called Let's AI, and it allows you to make mini models. Now they're popping up everywhere, but this is the one I've used just for this example. We put our model description in, and we add a load of training data. I think for this, there's only like 9 or 10 images that I threw in there, and you can see different angles, different colors, different lighting. It's really important to have give the model different settings and kind of scenes to look at, to train on. And then I start to get back amazing images. So like it takes about half an hour to train to an hour. And then I can just start putting in a Ford Puma with a T-Rex chasing it, or I can put it in a suburban town, or I can put it in a nice basement or in the Mojave Desert. So here's something that you get out. This is one that I particularly liked. I thought you can see, I don't know how well you can see from your screens, but there's a few little bits on the bonnet. There's a bit of a badge that shouldn't be there. What we go and do is chuck that in Photoshop and do some outpainting, get rid of that and tidy up the number plate and the badge. But aside from that, it's a Ford Puma. And then again, we can use the same tools to chuck that through. Oh, excuse me. Let's go back a bit. I cannot go back. Hold up. Bear with me. Wasn't it going so well? Here we go. Right. We're back. So here you go. So now we've got an upscaled 60 frames per second 4K video, which has been nicely created for us by Gen AI. Right. Let's move on. Oh, I see. I've forgotten my keyboard. Onwards. Okay, so this is what we like to call kit bashing. So not the name is not my invention, of course, but what it means is we're jumping from tool to tool. We're letting AI help other AIs make something amazing for us, and we're being the conductor. So with LLMs, our creative partner, and they're an expert in everything. They have all of human knowledge sucked up, and they can be anybody and help you with anything. We're using that to get our ideas to make our image. So we can work with large language models to develop key concepts and imagery, and then we're going to upscale them to make sure we can use them in advertising. And then we can use those key images to make video clips. So using image to video is much more consistent and useful for you than using text to video, because you get to make sure what the scene is first. It's like doing your storyboards, but instead shooting a photo of what you want to create and then bringing it to life. And then finally, adding audio onto that. So I haven't had time to go through this today, but there's some amazing tools for music, voiceovers, and avatars out there, which you can add on to your AI work after you've finished making it.
All the remaining cups, cans, and glasses. If you can have them ready for us as we pass by, we certainly would appreciate it. And much love from all of you to Fort Lauderdale.
So there we have it. There's our kind of final piece of work all together with everything, including sound, going in it.
All the remaining cups, cans, and glasses.
End it there by saying thank you very much. And I'd love to take some questions if you have any.
Oh, yeah, we'll have some questions out. Thank you for that. It was very interesting just to see the process. So thank you again. Pretty cool. Still, I think I saw the orca image when we talked earlier, James. Still a compelling image, the way that AI is doing that. Now, I'm going to ask a few questions. Well, first, I was glad you brought up Laura, because that was one of the quiz questions we had in our interactive portion of the show earlier. And I've forgotten what Laura stands for. That's how well I was paying attention to my own show. What does Laura stand for? Do you remember?
I actually can't remember what it
Low rank adaptation.
Low rank.
There you go.
Thank you.
Oh, thank goodness there's someone with a brain involved.
It was bugging me. Yes, that
Yeah.
was one of the answers. It was a multiple choice question, so I forgot which one was right.
Yeah, ironically, I would just go and ask AI probably.
Exactly. Now, you mentioned it's best when you're doing video to go from image to video, not text to video. Is that one of the tricks and tips here that you've discovered working with this stuff?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, you really, there's several reasons for that. You will want to have much more control over the output. So with text to video, you would have to describe an incredible amount to get what you want back. And also, if you're thinking about a accurate product like that car, you're going to have to describe the car. And even if you did your very best job, it wouldn't come back looking like what you want it to look like. Also, with a consistent character that you might have in your 15-second film, it's an athlete or something, and you've got a character in there or a particular item of clothing, you're going to want to make sure that that's consistent all the way through. If you're having to describe that to a model, every time you hit go, it's going to be something new. It's going to have a new variation of that. So yeah, 2 reasons. You get to storyboard out what you want, make sure you've got all the angles, make sure you've kind of fully kind of visualized your aesthetic, and then that helps you create really consistent video.
And I've just to describe a little bit about Brandtech Group, because we try to cover pencil and Jellyfish and all these components within the Brandtech Group. How do they all come together in some ways, or which parts are they servicing in the industry, just to have a sense?
Yeah, Adam, did you want to take that one?
I'll let you got the bigger Brandtech name on you. So
okay, yeah. So Jellyfish, Gravity Road, 55, who are our data agency, Collectively, who are the influencer team, Brandtech Consulting. The idea is that we all have specialisms within marketing and the digital marketing funnel, but we're kind of united by the building out a workflow for our clients. So that's increasingly becoming a Gen AI workflow. So Jellyfish, for example, have built something called Share of Model, which is a new tool that allows clients to understand how large language models are understanding their brand, what keywords are available, if the large language models are even mentioning your brand of mayonnaise when someone's asking what they should be adding to a particular recipe. So that's an example of how we have specialist companies in our group, but all of them are kind of developing generative AI tools that are starting to build into a coherent and really beautiful generative AI work stream that allows clients to kind of work with us through an entire process, from data and strategy through to influencers and kind of performance marketing out the other end.
And I'll throw in one thing for my specific part of the organization. We also do Gen AI training. That's my specific part of Jellyfish. We offer lots of other training opportunities. So if you want to upskill your own organization on a lot of these, come see us here at Jellyfish.
Yeah, super important.
Now we got an audience question. This is from Gertrude, who I think, if it's the same Gertrude, has offered a few questions today. So thank you, Gertrude. In your experience, what are the biggest hurdles for brands in using AI in ads? What are their big concerns?
Yeah, I can jump in there. Two things. I think the first thing is no previous experience. So that's like number one. Like, they know about it. Their brand hasn't done any of it. They haven't found a Gen AI partner that is taking them on a trusted journey yet. And they haven't experienced developing and delivering Gen AI content. I think that can be overcome quite quickly, and we can get on the same page. But when in terms of going live with AI in ads, there's such a range, right? So there's AI retouching. Okay, you wouldn't necessarily need to tell anybody that had happened. There's Gen AI backgrounds, or having an image that you photograph, but then you need it widescreen, so you've used AI to make it larger. So on this sliding scale, you get up to, are we going to put humans in it? And I think that's the bit at the moment that's the stickiest. We are looking at different ways to solve that in terms of brands being able to maintain trust with people that are viewing their advertising. And we're thinking around how we can use models, like have humans inside our advertising, using a LoRa to train on photographs of real people, and then being able to use them in our generative AI ads and pay them the same royalties they would get if we just use their print advertising. So yeah, obviously there's like, we have a green list of models that we put a lot of effort into looking at their T's and C's and legal status. So we put a lot of energy into, you know, the legal elements, what can be used with my brand and what can't. And then bias as well is a really big one that we look at. So do the models have inherent biases? Yes. Can that be mitigated? Yes, if you understand it. And we built a tool called Bias Breaker, which works within Pencil, which rolls dice effectively to randomize the way that your prompt is engineered. So if you put a man who's a CEO and you want an image of that, it would then roll a dice, and it will give you random probability that it will add ethnicity to that, gender to that, and all other kind of factors that will solve that. So yeah, those are kind of the biggest concerns and our solutions for them.
Good points there. And from a question here from Penny. Thank you, Penny. With these tools, do you have a way to check they're not stealing IP from creators, whether that be writers or artists? Back to concerns, I suppose. Yeah,
it's a huge concern. And that's why our green list is so important. So we have greenlit Adobe, for example, Adobe Firefly, Google Imagen, Stable Diffusion, and a whole host of other LLMs as well, precisely for this reason. So we don't want clients and we don't want ourselves to be caught in any of that. I know I used Midjourney here as an example just because most people have access to it. But from a IP and creator perspective, I think it's pretty shaky. There was a test that someone did of putting in something like Captain America, Blu-ray, screen, DVD, still shot, or something like that. And the images that it was creating, the person then went and found the frames in the movie that were almost like for like. So that's just raw IP that's been fed into the model. So yeah, you do have to be really careful. Adam, did you have anything to add on that?
A lot of it comes back to the data that the model is actually trained on, and finding responsible creators is probably the single most important thing you can do. If you're making your own green lists, it's really coming back to making sure you trust the model creators to not be stealing that.
Now I'm covering a lot of the platforms like Google, Meta, TikTok, and their Amazon. They're all releasing platforms that can integrate in ways with this technology that your ads are creating and then send them out to the platforms. How is that workflow changing? How's it changing advertising?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think what's great about Pencil and how we're approaching it is that the platform is agnostic to those. So if a client wants to work with Meta or TikTok with their AI tools, they're going to have to train each one and recreate ads in each platform, even though they're going to have to serve them to all of those platforms for any given campaign. So the nice thing about Pencil is that it is agnostic of the tool. So I can go in there and I can use Stable Diffusion for one thing and Google Imagen for another. I can use ChatGPT for something else. And that kind of, your license is for using all of those tools, which is super smart. So I think that's our approach to it, that we would rather just absorb the best of what's being released on a weekly, monthly basis, although obviously that's killer for the developers. But yeah.
I'm going to wrap it up in a sec. Is there anything else that's like, I keep hearing things like AI models are reaching peak performance, or maybe the next generation is not as big a leap as the previous generation. What is that? Is that a concern in AI worlds?
The biggest problem with a lot of this is that we're running out of human generated content to feed them. So the whole idea of building models is that you need to train them on data of some sort. And if you're already feeding in what is effectively all the world's information, what more information do you have to give them? You can make bigger models, but you can't continue to just add more data that doesn't exist. And data is really the single most crucial aspect of building these models.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we're running into synthetic data now, where they're using AI to generate like for like data that would be data that was from humans if it was from humans. And it's sort of becoming, I don't know, the whole thing's going to become quite self-referential. The one thing I try and always look for, which is really difficult when you're prompting, is to try and get the thing to be divergent. Much of the best advertising that you'll remember was divergent from the time that it was in. It was different, it was memorable, it was insightful, and that, the best strategists and planners and creatives are able to do that. So I think it may all become slower, perhaps. I doubt that. It seems very unlikely, but I think the main task, even if it does do that, is to try and remain divergent in how you use it and what you get out of it.
Well, thank you for that. We're actually going to talk about synthetic data at the end of this whole event, so stay tuned for that. And that was our time here. James and Adam, thank you both for joining. It was compelling and as expected, so thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Thanks for having us. See you, everybody.
Right. And now we're going to go to our Studio 30 editor, John Dioso, who has a message for everyone. So stay tuned and watch him, and then come back and join us for the rest of the show.
Thanks, Garrett. I'm John Dioso, editor of Ad Age Studio 30. This next conversation will focus on how advanced data analytics and cutting-edge technology are evolving beyond traditional marketing mix models to provide brands with future-focused, actionable insights. Joining me to discuss how emerging tech, including AI, is helping predict future campaign performance is Henrik Busch, CEO of Lift ROI at the Kantar Group. Henrik, thank you for being here.
Thank you very much for having me. Looking forward to our conversation today.
All right, let's get into it. So, Henrik, why don't we start with the evolution of marketing mix modeling? How have advanced data analytics helped address the limitations of traditional models by going further and delivering predictive, actionable insights?
It's a very interesting question. If you look at the evolution of MMM, or marketing mix modeling, I mean, it's been around for many years. I think all the way back to the 80s, it's been a technique that's been used by many advertisers to sort of measure to some degree the effect of the media investments they are doing, and to get a guidance in terms of if they invested in the right verticals. That meant you would operate on a channel level insights, and you might do a model update once a year. With this very limited amount of data, you weren't really able to harvest sort of the full value out of the potential optimization you could do. With today's technique and models and machine learning, you're actually able to get a much granular insights than you were in the past. And that granular insights means that you can go down to the individual publisher, whether it's on TV or digital or any other media channels you've utilized. And that insight level gives you the ability to do a much more precise and generate predictive insights that enable your brands to simulate scenarios and optimize your strategies almost at that level that you used to know from multi-touch attribution. So at Kantar, we have a platform called Left ROI that basically bridge the gap between traditional MMM modeling and MTA with the same level of granularity and actionability, but across all media groups as well, without the hassle of incorporating cookies. And that means that you have the same agility as you would like to see.
Right, and that granularity, I'm sure, plays a big part in that. I'm sure we'll come back to that in a second, but the next thing I want to discuss is that recently Kantar conducted a study in partnership with Meta and CreativeX that highlights the importance of specific creative elements, such as human connection, brand integration, and visual dynamism in driving ad effectiveness on digital platforms, particularly on mobile. So you mentioned Lift ROI, how does Lift ROI incorporate these creative quality levers into its analysis? And what insights have you gained, and how they impact overall campaign ROI?
Yeah, it's like the missing piece of MMM has always been the creative effect, right? So you've been sort of leaving out one of the biggest drivers. I think we can all recognize when we see a good ad and when we see a bad ad, right? So we can all memorize saying, oh, this is really a good ad. It will bring up conversations, or you even tend to hate bad ads, right? So for us, it was imperative to add that dimension into our modeling framework because at Kantar, we had a product called Link AI. And what Link AI do is actually to harvest on the vast amount of data Kantar has as a group, where we've been testing creatives for the last 50 years, right? So we took all our data and we basically created an AI that enables us to quantify the future effect of creative. So we want to run it through the AI, and that tells us what we should expect from this piece of creative. And because we have that data, we can now incorporate that into the MMMs for future planning and say, okay, if you add this creative, you would expect this effect on top of your media investments. So it sort of amplifies the media effect. And it really sort of changed the way that you used to operate. In just a couple of years ago, you would sort of run test and learn experiments. You might have 5 different creatives. But one of the downsides about that was that it's very difficult to do on TV. It's very expensive to do on TV. It might work in digital, but if you want to have this sort of synergy between all your creatives, it was really, really difficult to manage. So by adding this into our product, you sort of get the best of 2 worlds. You don't need to do test and learn. You can harvest the insights of all the campaigns you've been running in the past and get a creative score before you launch your campaign. And we will add that creative score into the MMM modeling, and by that being able also to attribute the effect of the creative. So all of a sudden you can quantify and say, this creative have generated this amount of sales. So that's a really interesting aspect, especially in times where people have really been saving on the creative budgets and say more is better, cheaper is better. And in that equation, some companies might have sort of lost the quality aspect, and we can bring sort of the quantified value of the creative as well as you can analyze your media.
All right. And the next thing I want to discuss is, as I said in my intro, predicting future campaign performance. I mean, that is in the age of data. That really is kind of the gold standard that every marketer and every brand is aiming for. So predictive insights have become crucial in helping brands stay agile in the way that they approach their campaigns. How are companies leveraging predictive analytics to make in-flight adjustments to campaigns? And what results have you seen from this real-time adaptability?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in Left ROI, integration of AI is really sort of changed the way that you use MMM. MMM used to be sort of a technique you would use to analyze what you did a couple of months ago. And because it was so slow to update the models, it's really sad to see now you get a learning of the campaign. You said you should have done this instead. And you actually get a result saying, you didn't really do that well that you could have done. But since we have incorporated a Bayesian statistic approach in our modeling framework, that allows us to have the agility, the speed that you would know for in-flight optimization. And that gives you the opportunity to predict ahead. So before you actually launch a campaign, you can brief our platform and say, if, for instance, you're a telco and within the next month or the next campaign period, my target is to get 10,000 new clients. You simply brief the platform and it tells you what type of media distribution down to the single publisher and with the right budget setting on a daily level across all the channels. So you get a sort of a full suite of media allocation. And it also tells you how much is the single channel driving, and it takes into account the synergy effects between the different media groups. It's also something that's been left out for many types of MMM models, that you wouldn't really sort of say, what is the synergy between being on TV and advertising on search? But by capturing that effect, you sort of can do the right distribution. And you can do that ahead. So one of the examples that we, for instance, work within is that we're able to predict total sales into the future. So we're not only looking at marketing, but we're looking at all drivers. And that means we also allow the customers to be able to adjust for the different drivers. So for instance, if you believe that the unemployment rate will change within the next 2 months, you can simply adjust that in the platform and it will take that into account. So it's really changed the way you work as an advertiser. And we bring sort of, sometimes we say we bring the CFO language into the CMO suite, because you're talking metrics, numbers, predictability, likelihood, stuff that those types of people normally love.
Well, that was a really great example. And I'm glad that you brought up the telecom industry and also the media mix. It plays so much that can help predict or have brands adjust which channels that they go into. But I'd like to dive a little bit deeper into that. And, Kantar works with different brands across various industries, from automotive to financial services, for example. Could you share how advanced data analytics can be customized to meet the needs of different sectors and other unique insights that have emerged from Lift ROI's cross-vertical applications, speaking of channels?
Sure. So one of the places where we really see sort of a very different use case of our technology, for instance, if you have the automotive industry, it has a very characteristic set of things that is driving the business, right? Petrol prices, for instance. Doesn't make sense to add in petrol prices in a model for a telco because it has really no correlation. But in the car industry, is there anyone subsidizing electric vehicles? Is that something we need to take into account? Dealer incentive is also something that's driving that business heavily. What are the competitors' activity? What are they planning to do? What type of inventory do you have available? Do you actually have the cars ready? And then remember, the decision journey within automotive is very long. So the minute you sort of start considering buying a car and you actually buy a car, that might be a decision journey between 5 and 6 months. So the key aspect here is to sort of measure which touch points is driving the ultimate goal, which is selling a car. The other element that's very specific within the car industry is planning ahead, right? So actually knowing how many cars do you expect to sell within a month. And what we can do for our clients is you can simply get a prediction saying how many cars, given that these are the circumstances, in a month, how many cars will I sell? And we operate with a likelihood between 95 to 97% accuracy in predicting the total sales, which is quite amazing. So that's sort of one use case. If we go to, for instance, financial institutions, it's a very different business. So most financial institutions, they have multiple products. They would have a mortgage loan, they would have a payroll account, they would have a credit card, they would have a car loan. And for these financial institutions, what is very important for them is, of course, to see which product is driving the clients into buying more products. And what we have been able to do is actually look at that synergy between the products and couple that with your media investment as well. So all of a sudden you can, as a financial institution, saying, should I build my brand? Should I drive my clients through my payroll account product? Because that's driving more value than just trying to advertise for a credit card loan. And sort of getting that holistic aspect should really change the way you navigate as a financial institution. And you have sort of a holistic approach to media and advertising, and not just looking at the linear attribution saying, I advertise this product, I got this many clients. What you actually need to do is say, I advertise this product, I got this many clients, but this many clients then turned into buying the other products. And then you have the full value of that media investment. And that's really changing the aspect of how you operate your business.
All right, well, we just have about a minute left, and you talked about granularity before. And of course, granularity the ability to do that comes from the data, and data ownership has become a growing priority in the industry. Many brands are taking steps to manage their own data. So what advice would you give to brands on best practices for data management?
Well, that's a very, very good point. You need to own your data. As an advertiser, that's your assets, that's your gold, that's what going to build the future for you as a company. And that's also what's going to set you apart from your competitors. So you need to have a good data strategy. You need to ensure that you have access to all the data, you know where it's located, and you have a very strict naming convention and tiling of the data. That's what's going to set you apart. And that's what's going to enable you to not only use MMM in a very advanced way, but also enables you to utilize AI with many different techniques. If you don't have the data, you can't use the technology.
All right. Well, I think we can wrap it up there. Henrik Busch, from Kantar. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Up next, my colleague, Ad Age reporter, Asa Heiken. Take it away, Asa.
Hey everyone, welcome to our next session, Step into the Future Lab. I'm Asa Heiken, and for this panel, we're going to be talking a lot about innovation and innovation labs. So I'm glad to be joined by 4 panelists to make this as lively a conversation as possible. Please welcome Ron Friedman, VP of Mattel Future Lab, Maria Pavlova, Marketing Science Lead for Meta's Global Clients and Agencies Division, Andy Kaufman, Senior VP of Marketing Strategy and Science for the NFL, and Catherine D. Henry, futurist, tech advisor, and author. Thank you, everyone, for joining me.
Good to be here.
Great to be
here. Hi, Asa. Hi, everyone.
So, innovation is a buzzword. So just to start things off in a concrete way, what is innovation for, given today's marketing challenges? And we can start with Ron, then go to Maria, then Andy, then Catherine.
Sure. So, we and I live and breathe innovation every day. And I think that some people think about innovation as a way to break through, right? And think about tech/innovation as a way to deliver some wow moment that allows us to, bring some attention to our brands and to our products. But I think while that may be partially true, I think that's an incomplete and the wrong way of looking at innovation. I think that we see as innovation as a way to meet our consumers where they are, and consumers' behaviors and expectations are constantly changing. And so we try to innovate our products and experiences and marketing campaigns to try and meet our consumers where they are. We take a real human-centered approach to think about consumer first, experience second, and then technology third as a way to solve a problem that allows us to innovate in a meaningful way, right? It's about always remaining authentic. It's about being culturally relevant, and delivering value, surprise and delight in a way that matters, right? Not just because tech for tech's sake, but as a way to deliver value. That's how we think about it.
Great, Maria.
I think what you mentioned there, Ron, around consumer needs always changing, and from Meta perspective, we really work a lot on meeting those consumer changes. But then from my team, I work with largest advertisers to really making sure that the way how they leverage Meta to communicate with consumers in the dollars are spent in the most in best possible way. So a lot of what we work on innovation is really making sure how do we work with advertisers to have a clear understanding of what are the new things they can try, how can we experiment, and how we constantly can learn from those experiments. And we might try certain strategies or certain tactics, and they might work or they might not work, but it's ultimately ensuring that we have that strategy on continuous test and learn and trying new things and learning from having value where we know something worked and something didn't.
Yeah, and from my standpoint, it's similar to what Ron and Maria both said, but I think the additional layer I would add is innovation is not for the faint of heart. You have to be willing to fail. You have to be willing to learn, and you should root that in the business, because ultimately, how you engage in our case, our fan base, your partners, etc., is how you're going to commercialize innovation, but bring that in as a secondary factor versus bringing that in too early. So you can let this sort of the new ideas flow and the new technologies flow. And so we certainly bring things to our business, but the way we do that is by bringing a cross-functional view to it, to guide the work versus stifle the work.
Yeah, so I mean, I think absolutely. I think for me, I tend to talk about innovation a lot in terms of technology. But one of the biggest mistakes that I think is that when people start associating technology with innovation, and in fact, it's not about the hardware, it's about the human need it serves. And so people are fundamentally very practical when it comes to innovation, and they'll adopt technology that solves real problems or engages people in new forms of creativity, or ideally both. And so, the big question is, how seamless are people able to adapt this into their lives, and how easy is it for them to start to use it more creatively? Because ultimately, it's the creative use, the culture, that drives the innovation with technology, not the opposite. So it's not top down, it's bottom up.
So I promise we're not going to harp too much on AI, but I do want to bring it in just from the start, because, to Catherine's point, it does kind of sit right here at the nexus of new technology, but also doing something for consumers and for brands. And I think that's, kind of at the heart of why brands are using it. So, just to get it out of our systems, because it's important that we acknowledge how also innovation is bigger than the AI space. But Maria, when brands come to Meta wanting to use AI to strengthen engagement with audiences, or to use it in any way to sort of enhance their brand, what do you tell them? What are the common misunderstandings when it comes to using this area of innovation for improving reach?
Yeah, it's a great question, Asa. And AI, of course, it's a very exciting space right now. And any conversation with our advertisers that is related to AI or any other new solutions, we always start ultimately from the first and the basis of understanding for any particular campaign, what is the core objective? What is the business outcome they're trying to drive for this particular campaign or maybe for the brand as a whole? Because AI can deliver unprecedented value to advertisers, and they can get the most benefit out of the value when there is a clarity around what are we trying to do, what are we trying to achieve, and then we bring the right AI solution to help with that. And so kind of once we establish what is that key success metric that we are trying to influence, then usually the way how we work is there is lots of solutions that we can test, and we go and experiment. We come up with a test strategy or test design where we try to find a few different tactics that we would try for advertiser to see which one of them would then shift that particular metric they care about. In the space of AI and audience engagement, some of the things that we've been testing lately quite a lot is one of those solutions from Meta Advantage Plus suite, which is one of the newly launched AI-powered ad tools. And specifically for audience, what we've been testing a lot is a kind of shifting from traditional way how campaigns might be setting up, where advertiser might define audience using, let's say, a demographic or interest targeting, to kind of this new way where those definitions are used as inputs, but they don't limit the algorithm. The algorithm is kind of uses them as the inputs and then goes and finds audiences that might look similar to those, but actually if there is some other audiences that are being missed out on those definitions, then the algorithm is not limited on that. So kind of those are some of the solutions that really provide that opportunity to find the right people and actually engage with the right consumers and increase that reach. In terms of the misunderstandings, one of the core ones I'd say in this space is around creative. So there is a lot of things and a lot of tools we can bring to advertisers to help them reach the right users and expand that reach and grow their customer base. And one of the important things is to kind of give the algorithm that flexibility, that liquidity to go and find the right people without restricting it. But then ultimately, if the relevant content or the relevant creative is not there, then that ability of the algorithm to find the right people, it won't have the relevant creative to show. So what we talk a lot with our advertisers is creative is the new targeting. And what we've also tested a lot in this space is of having more creative executions within one campaign. That's where it really becomes powerful, kind of using the AI-powered ways to find the new audiences mixed with having that flexibility and giving the liquidity to the campaign to serve those multiple creatives to the right audience.
So, these issues are obviously felt by brands. And so I want to go to Ron and then Andy. How have your brands addressed these issues and others when experimenting with AI, particularly with respect to the innovation hub that kind of sits at the center of innovation for your brand?
For us, I think, and I think building on what we said in the prior question, AI in itself is not the end all and be all. And I don't think that AI in its own is the answer, right? I think that, especially not for us who, we're a toy and play company, we're not an AI company. We see AI as a way to solve a problem, right? Or address a consumer need that we've been, thinking about for a long time, as a way to enhance the play experience, to elevate a product in a way that we haven't been able to do. For example, breathing life into characters or deepen engagement and create meaningful interactions that in the past have been difficult to do without some of these capabilities. But in the end, it's about the end user, it's about the consumer, and that's what we need to make sure that we're focused on. And we're working with AI, we're working on AI, but always with a lens of consumer first, right, and human centered first. We also, our brand is built on trust, right? We hold one of the most delicate relationships in the world with both children and families and their parents. And so we want to make sure that everything that we're doing is built on privacy and security and safety for children and families, that we as a creator company, right, that is built on human creativity, we're being respective and ethical in how we're using AI and how we're leveraging AI. So we're not shying away, we're leaning into AI, but we're making sure that we're being deliberate, that we're being purposeful, and that we're being very careful in how we're taking each step here to make sure that we're keeping that trust and for our brands, for our values, and for our customers to continue to be happy to engage with us.
Yeah, and from my standpoint at the NFL, we're very fortunate to have such a huge fan base and a deeply engaged fan base, so much so many of our fans they identify their household as a Steelers household or an Eagles household or a Packers household, which is an incredible opportunity as a brand, but also an incredible responsibility. And when I think about AI first, AI isn't new. A lot of these principles, a lot of what it's doing have existed for a while in the marketing space, which certainly in the targeting and buying space, whether it was search, programmatic, or even in personalization. But as we approach how to do it better, our business strategies remain the same. Ultimately, what we're trying to do remains the same. We're trying to grow fandom. We're trying to deepen engagement. We're trying to have our fans spend even more time and energy with us. And similar to what Ron was saying, we have a great responsibility that when we're going to use their data, that we're doing so in a way that it complies with their wishes. And that we're not just chasing a shiny thing for a shiny thing, but rather we're chasing shiny experiences that create a better engagement with the NFL that ultimately results in them spending more energy, more time, more money with the league and our clubs. We do a lot of research around fans' wants, needs, around how they engage with the sport. And we've identified a number of what we call moments that matter that either create more delight for them in terms of engaging with the game or solves a challenge that they have. Back to human-centric design. Sometimes there's friction in that experience. And so we're looking to either delight them. So for example, we're using AI right now with one of our broadcast partners to identify the likelihood that a player may blitz on a play in the pre-snap count. And they get a little highlight if they're going to do that. Makes it easier for some of our fans to watch the game when they may be not the most avid fan. In other cases, we're creating other experiences that are I'll call out one that we utilized last year, which was a virtual environment with playing a game in a Toy Story environment in Andy's room with our partnership with ESPN and Disney. These are all designed around engaging either our existing fans more deeply or bringing new fans into the sport to increase their avidity curve with us. So it's all rooted in knowing your fan, having a good set of data, but then building experiences around that goes back to your core business needs versus just chasing the shiny opportunity for the shiny sake.
So, Catherine, you've consulted a lot on different technologies, and I know from experience being a tech reporter that sometimes, I'm looking for some of the other technologies to write about. And so I'm curious, what other forms of emerging technologies do you think are most important for brands right now to sort of test and experiment when thinking about innovation for the next year?
I'm so glad you brought that up because obviously the focus has been very much on AI for the past 2 years now. And I think as we look into 2025, we have to rethink what relevance means to companies going forward. And, obviously AI has been able to help us reach our audiences at scale, which is a wonderful thing. And having worked for one of the world's largest engineering companies, we did talk a lot about marketing solutions that will allow you to reach your customer at scale. But to me, it's not about the scale. It's about being able to reach their customer more effectively. It's not about blasting the content because AI isn't a vending machine for content. It's really about being much more human scale. And I think that's something that I've heard a couple of times already in the broadcast is other of our colleagues from Meta and from Mattel have said that this is something that's important to them as companies. So I'm glad to hear that. There are other ways that are really much more intrinsic to the way that young people, especially Gen Z and Gen A, which are going to be the largest demographic within the next 3 years, are going to be in terms of population. It's 210 million people in Asia and 75 million in the United States and approximately 50 million people in Europe. So how are we going to reach that new demographic in a relevant way? And I think, my big message is that brands need to take play seriously. And I don't need to tell that to the brands here on this panel because that's your core business, but too many people are overlooking the space of gaming. And to me, it's a very important space. The second thing is, mixed reality experiences. We've seen a lot of AR headsets and even the prototypes. I've got, my little Meta Ray-Bans here, which I adore. And I've got a video coming out soon about the new Meta Ray-Bans and the Snapchat lenses, etc. They're all very exciting, but we need to really think about how we can use this to help people create content seamlessly and to share it seamlessly. Because ultimately, again, these platforms are about creating moments of joy and delight. So if we take play seriously, it's about embedding that into our business model so that UGC creators and also consumers of content are constantly experiencing joy. Our brands have to be reconfigured as experiences and using technology to convey that. So I think gaming, certainly AR and AI can be combined in new ways that allow us to engage our communities much more effectively, and instead of kind of shouting at them, become co-creators with them.
So, Catherine, you're absolutely right. With Mattel and the NFL here, these are two brands really focused on play. But I'm really curious.
And Meta too, because they've got Horizon Worlds, they've got the immersive concerts. I mean, they've been really doing some fun stuff with the VR headsets, and I can't wait for Orion glasses to evolve.
True. That's also true. But what? We can go to Andy here and then Ron. How, because you all again sit in these innovation labs at your respective brands, and so I'm wondering if you could briefly just explain how your brand kind of identifies emerging technologies to experiment with, and how maybe the format of an innovation lab facilitates this, as opposed to maybe a brand that doesn't have an innovation lab.
Yeah, sure. So first, at the NFL, our innovation hub serves as a place that businesses can bring new ideas or new opportunities together, but not have it operate in a silo. They then it works with cross-functional input from the sort of core business areas. And why I start there is I've worked in other places where the innovation hub, call it whatever you want, has been siloed from the business, has an innovation agenda, and isn't rooted in ultimately the macro business needs. And then it ends up becoming a place that cool ideas come out of, but cool ideas that can't scale and get operationalized and ultimately help the business grow. And so what we have is sort of I think the best of both worlds. We have an innovation hub led out of our IT organization with cross-functional input and representation, where I can bring as a marketing leader new ideas and new areas that I want to explore to a group who vets the space, identifies partners, and starts to do rapid prototyping to bring in real solutions that could be commercialized in, let's call it the short term versus the 6 or 12 months horizon. So for example, we're working on one right now. It's around content proliferation and versioning. As you can imagine, we have a ton of content. We have, I'll just take one example. Content to help our fans tune into our games every week. We are publishing thousands of pieces of content encouraging across all of our partners, both here in the US as well as internationally. As we scale into even more countries, the just sheer magnitude and versioning of that becomes unwielding. And by the way, we shouldn't have a designer doing versioning anymore. That's one thing that AI can do tremendously well. So we're working on a prototype right now, which would version our creative in, call it as many languages as you need, but also localize that content, not just change the language, but localize it. So for example, if a game is airing on Fox or CBS or Amazon here in the US, it may be on a different network in the UK versus Germany versus on Australia. That's intelligence we want built into the AI. We want versioning of creative in terms of the players that are being utilized. So the most popular players on those two teams that are playing for that locale. And ideally for people where we know that we can actually get down to the people level. And so you can imagine just the proliferation of content that's necessary. And that all started by us going to say, and we've said this very publicly, we're expanding rapidly around the globe. Not unlike what I suspect others on the call would say, our budgets aren't going to grow commensurate with the level of growth that we want to do. So we need leverage in terms of economies of scale, in terms of better and more efficient content generation, but also more impactful content. And that's where the personalization and versioning really comes in. And we went to them and said, this is the business challenge. How do we together identify partners, build that into our sort of core pipeline, and start to rapid prototype our ability to bring that to market? And we're in the middle of that right now.
Ron, is Mattel's situation like that as well?
Yeah, I mean, actually, I was going to say it's incredibly refreshing and validating to hear how Andy and Catherine and Maria, like everyone is thinking about innovation and how we're exploring emerging tech opportunities in a very similar way. So, being cautious of not sounding like a broken record and repeating myself and what others have said, I think that it's really important that we start from the end user, right? It's very easy to get sort of like enamored by this shiny new thing, right? There's AI and VR and blockchain and whatever new thing that is happening, that it's in vogue at the moment, and to chase that because you want to catch a wave. And I'll admit that we've done it in the past, but that the end result will be something that will not scale or deliver the value that I think we would need to be. And so we've built a process in Future Lab that we call our discovery process, which is a design thinking, human-centered, agile process that allows us to really think about and work backwards from the end user, right, and what they want, right? We don't start by thinking, well, what could we do with this technology or that technology? We instead ask, like, how might we bring Barbie to life, right? Or how might we gamify the Hot Wheels collector experience? And those how might we's are really initiated through consumer insights, right? And understanding and observing consumer behavior and talking with our customers and looking at the data, and then thinking about, well, how can we solve that, right? And we try to answer three big questions, which may sound very obvious, right? To validate desirability. Do customers want this? What is the experience that they'll want, and what is the most value that we can deliver? Can we make it? And what are the things that we need to be able to make it, right? What technologies can we solve, right? Again, it's consumer first, experience second, technology third. And then that's when we find the right emerging technology or the right opportunity to solve that problem, whatever that may be. And then we think about, well, can we actually monetize it and scale it, right? And like Andy was saying, like, we're not trying to do innovation for innovation's sake. We sit here in the middle as a way to enable and experiment and try things that will deliver value, right? And hopefully transformative value that will keep our brands and our company relevant for the next 80 years. And I think that's the approach that we take. And we try to be really cautious about things and experimental. Like, again, it's about failing fast and trying new things to find that nugget, right? And what is that thing that will ultimately scale and connect to the business? Because if it doesn't, it creates a nice PR moment, we'll get a press release out of it, and then people will forget about it. And I think that's not the purpose of innovation, and it's not the purpose of why we established Future Lab within Mattel. And I think that's what I think is our recipe for success so far.
I actually love what you just said there, Ron, because, you've basically, most companies think of innovation labs as a luxury. And these days it's one of the first things to go. And yet, to your point, everyone thinks of technology as a shiny new thing. And often what you'll find is multiple departments across a company initiating small projects with different levels of success, but also that's a risk to the business. And it also can be very costly at the end. So having, I think, a lab like yours or Andy like yours, I think that's really helpful. How have you felt this as a kind of the nice to have versus necessary? And have you felt that inside your companies, this has been a really great way to streamline? And I think you've talked to this, but streamline the activities in such a way that it can be more impactful in the end.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, yeah, go ahead, Andy.
No, go, Andy. Go ahead.
No, go on.
Or sorry, Ron.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I think that's exactly right. I think that what we're trying to do is create a compounding effect, right? I think that, as we know, innovation is going to be, and Andy said it, right? It's not for the faint of heart, because it's going to have a lot of failures. But in those failures, there are learnings, and there's opportunities for us to compound the learnings of those things and build capabilities and build expertise that allows us to improve our hit rate over time and be more successful over time. And so that's a message that we've trying to evangelize, right? And it hasn't been easy, right? Again, I think in this economy and how things have gone, being able to validate the importance of building innovation teams is not a small feat. But I think that we've been lucky in having leadership that believes in innovation. And Mattel has been around for 80 years now. And for a company to be relevant for that long of a time, it needs to continue to innovate, right? So that we can continue to keep engagement with our fans and expand our audiences over time. And I think that innovation has been proven to be the right recipe for that, right? And Mattel Future Lab is, I don't know, maybe 2% of the entire innovation that happens at Mattel. Innovation happens everywhere. But I think that as it relates to riskier, more unconventional tech-based, we try to de-risk it by putting it into this process and then capitalize it over the long term.
Yeah, and I think it's similar for us too. Like as I said a few minutes ago, we don't start with the "wouldn't it be cool if." We start with, do we have some business challenges that we're trying to solve? Now, how can technology create something amazing that helps us solve that problem? And if it's cool and innovative and first to market, even better. And so it's really worked for us from that standpoint. And some of the coolest ideas have come out of like the Toy Story experience I talked about, which on December 9th, we'll do our second one with Disney around, and a football game set in the world of The Simpsons. Those are all rooted in reaching new audiences. So it's a fan growth strategy, but delivered in a way that creates, I can't remember who said it, but those wow moments that really delight our current fans, but also have proven to bring in new fans.
So we only have about a little over a minute left. And I want to end this with Maria. We started off talking about the concept of innovation. And Meta obviously advises brands on these technologies and innovation, but budgets are tight and companies are always looking to cut more costs, as was previously mentioned. How can marketers continue to test innovation and new technologies despite these budget constraints and other pressures going into 2025?
Yeah, that's a critical question, and something that I think Ron also touched on around the question that you asked, Catherine, whether innovation and experimentation is a luxury or a necessity. And it's really just being focused on having that clarity on what are the business goals are, and then having clarity on the pipeline of what are the core hypotheses that we think we need to test to really, that would make a difference on those goals, rather than having a bit of a laundry list of all the things that we want to experiment on. And another fascinating research that my colleagues done a couple of years ago, just actually quantifying having that culture of experimentation and really having that integral, just how valuable it is. They usually see that brands that and companies that have that culture, that embed test and learn approach into everything they do, have a quantifiable impact on the success and the performance of their campaigns. So it's just really understanding what are the key priorities of the business are, and what are the key levers that we think might help us achieve those, and then having that robust strategy of testing and experimenting with new approaches, but keeping in mind that end goal of what it ultimately we're trying to achieve, and having clarity on which levers we think are the most impactful to trying to test to achieve that.
So, to absolutely no one's surprise, this panel has really just flown by, and we had so many more questions to get to, but I guess we'll have to do it for the next Emerging Tech Summit. Thank you all, Maria, Ron, Andy, and Catherine, for being here.
Thank you all. It's a pleasure.
Thanks so much.
And now we are taking another hour break, and we'll be back at 3 p.m. with a conversation with me and Cameron Curtis from Warner Bros.